The cantina on Nexus Station was dark and quiet. Most of the alien visitors had gone to their rooms for the night. Only a few customers remained at the metal tables, drinking their evening meals from glowing cups. In the corner, away from the others, sat Commander Zeftar. The old Altarian warrior looked tired. His forearms rested on the table, and his thick shell-like skin showed many scars from old battles. Some scars were from energy weapons. Others came from sharp blades. But the worst scars were the ones nobody could see. Those were the memories that kept him awake at night. Zeftar lifted his drink with one of his lower arms. The blue liquid glowed softly in the dim light. He had been drinking the same thing for 3 hours, but the cup was still almost full. His mind was somewhere else, thinking about things he tried to forget. A young female approached his table. She was Crixla, a journalist from the Galactic News Network. Her green skin marked her as a Zentari, one of the newer species in the Coalition. She carried a small recording device and moved carefully, like someone who did not want to scare away a dangerous animal. "Commander Zeftar?" she said in a soft voice. "My name is Crixla. I write stories for the news. Could I talk to you about the humans?" Zeftar's 4 eyes turned to look at her. His mandibles clicked together, making a sound like breaking glass. "Go away, child. You do not want to hear what I have to say." But Crixla did not leave. She sat down across from him and placed her recording device on the table. "The Coalition wants people to know the truth about the Terran integration wars. You were there. You saw what happened. The truth?" Zeftar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a happy sound. "The truth is that your Coalition leaders are fools. They think they won something when the humans agreed to join us. They do not understand what really happened." Crixla leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Zeftar was quiet for a long time. He looked at his drink, then at the young journalist, then back at his drink. Finally, he spoke. "I commanded 3 battle fleets during the war. I fought against 12 different human colonies. I watched civilizations that had ruled star systems for thousands of years fall to creatures who had barely learned to travel between planets. Do you know why?" "Because humans are good fighters," Crixla suggested. "No." Zeftar's voice became very quiet. "Because humans are not like us. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. When we fight, we follow rules. We have honor. We protect the weak. Humans have no such limits." He took a small sip of his drink and continued. "Let me tell you about the first time I met them. It was at the Kepler colony, a small mining settlement on the edge of human space. Intelligence told us there were maybe 50 humans there, with light weapons and no military training. An easy victory." Crixla activated her recording device. "What happened?" "I brought 200 ships and 5,000 soldiers. The humans had 1 small station and maybe 20 fighters. By all the laws of war, they should have surrendered immediately. Instead, they sent us a message." "What did it say?" "Come and take it." Zeftar clicked his mandibles again. 3 words, that was all. I thought they were being brave. I did not understand they were making a promise. The old commander's eyes became distant as he remembered. The battle should have lasted 1 hour. It lasted 3 days. The human commander was Captain Jake Morrison, a young male who had never fought in a real war before. His second in command was Lieutenant Lisa Harper, barely out of their military academy. "They must have had secret weapons," Crixla said. "No weapons, no reinforcements, no hope of rescue. But they had something else, something we had never seen before." Zeftar paused. "They had the ability to turn anything into a weapon." He leaned back in his chair. "When we destroyed their fighters, they used the wreckage to build bombs. When we cut off their power, they used manual systems we did not even know existed. When we poisoned their water supply, they recycled their own waste to stay alive. That is disturbing. That was just the beginning. On the second day, they started using our own dead against us. They took the bodies of my soldiers and booby-trapped them. When we tried to recover our fallen comrades, they exploded. The humans had no respect for the dead, not even their enemies." Crixla's green skin had turned pale. "How could they do such things?" Because they are predators, Zeftar said simply. Every other species in the galaxy evolved from prey animals. We learned to cooperate, to share, to avoid conflict. Humans evolved from hunters. They learned to kill, to adapt, to never give up. He drank more of his glowing liquid. On the third day, I thought we had them. We had destroyed their main building and killed most of their fighters. Captain Morrison and maybe 10 others were trapped in the mining tunnels below the station. I sent my best troops down to finish them. And they never came back up. The humans had turned the tunnels into a maze of death. Every corridor was trapped. Every room was a killing ground. My soldiers, who had fought in dozens of battles, were hunted like animals in the dark. Zeftar's voice became even quieter. But the worst part was the sounds. The humans made noises while they hunted, they whistled, they sang. They called out to each other like they were playing a game. My soldiers were dying in terror, and the humans were having fun. What happened? To Captain Morrison? He survived. So did Lieutenant Harper and 3 others. 5 humans against 5,000 coalition soldiers, and they won. When my reinforcements arrived, they found the mining station destroyed and my entire invasion force dead or missing. Crixilla stared at him. All of them? The humans had taken prisoners, not for information or ransom, but for other purposes. They needed to understand how we thought, how we fought, how we could be defeated. They dissected some of my soldiers while they were still alive, studying their biology. Others they kept alive for psychological experiments. That is against every law of war in the galaxy. Humans do not care about our laws. They make their own rules. Zeftar finished his drink and set the cup down hard. Captain Morrison sent me a message after the battle. He thanked me for the training exercise, said his people learned a lot about coalition tactics and would put that knowledge to good use. A training exercise? That is what they called it. To them, my invasion was not a threat. It was an opportunity to learn how to fight us better. They used my attack to prepare for the real war that was coming. Crixilla was quiet for a moment. Did you ever meet Captain Morrison again? Yes, during the peace negotiations 3 years later. He was a general by then, still young, still smiling. He shook my hand with his soft pink skin and told me he hoped we could be friends now. Zeftar shuddered. I could see in his eyes that he remembered every detail of our first meeting. He was proud of what he had done. What did you say to him? Nothing. What could I say? He had defeated me with 50 people against my thousands. He had turned my soldiers into specimens for his scientists. He had made me afraid of my own shadow, and then he offered to be my friend. Zeftar stood up slowly. That is when I knew the coalition had already lost the war. We just did not know it yet. The old commander walked away, leaving Crixilla alone with her recording device and her thoughts. Outside the cantina's windows, human ships moved through space alongside coalition vessels, their crews working together as allies. But now she wondered if they were really allies, or if they were something else entirely. She looked at her recording device and realized she was afraid to listen to what she had just recorded. Some truths, she thought, were too dangerous to share. Crixilla returned to the cantina the next evening. She had spent the entire day thinking about Commander Zeftar's story. The recording device sat on her desk, but she had not listened to it again. Some memories were better left alone, but she needed to know more. The coalition leaders spoke of humans as valued allies and friends. They said the integration wars were a misunderstanding that led to a better future for everyone. Zeftar's story painted a very different picture. The old Altarian was sitting in the same corner, drinking the same glowing blue liquid. His forearms moved slowly, like someone much older than his years. When he saw Crixilla approaching, his mandibles clicked in what might have been annoyance. "You came back," he said without looking at her. "I need to hear more," Crixilla replied, sitting down across from him. "Please." Zeftar was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed, a sound like air escaping from a broken machine. "Very well. But this story is worse than the first. Are you sure you want to know?" Crixilla activated her recording device and nodded. "This happened 6 months after Kepler colony. We had learned not to underestimate humans, but we still did not understand what they truly were. The battle took place on New Olympia, a contested world in the border systems. He took a sip of his drink before continuing. We had captured a squad of human Marines during a patrol, 12 soldiers led by Sergeant Danny Carter and Corporal Amy Brooks. Standard procedure was to hold them as prisoners until we could exchange them for our own people. That sounds reasonable, Crixilla said. We thought so too. The humans had been fighting us for months, but they followed most of the traditional rules of war. They treated our prisoners well. They did not torture captured soldiers. We expected the same behavior from them. Zeftar's eyes became distant again. We held the humans in a secure facility in Crimson Valley, our main base on New Olympia. The prison was underground, built into solid rock. It had never been breached in 50 years of use. We thought the humans were safe there until the prisoner exchange could be arranged. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. Everything went exactly as the humans planned. The old commander's voice became very quiet. 3 days after we captured the squad, we started receiving strange reports from our outer patrols. Soldiers were disappearing. Equipment was being sabotaged. Our communications were being intercepted. He paused to drink more of his glowing liquid. At first, we thought it was normal guerrilla activity. The humans had small groups operating behind our lines. But the pattern was different this time. The attacks were too coordinated, too precise. Someone was studying our defenses very carefully. The rescue mission? More than a rescue. It was a complete military operation planned and executed with surgical precision. The humans sent an entire battalion to get back 12 people. Major Steve Collins led the mission, with support from Captain Ben Rodriguez and Lieutenant Ashley Turner. Crixilla leaned forward. That seems like a lot of resources for just 12 soldiers. That is what we thought. We were wrong. Those 12 soldiers were not just prisoners to the humans. They were family. And humans will do anything to protect their family. Zeftar set down his cup and looked directly at the young journalist. Do you know what pack behavior is? Animals that hunt together? More than that. Pack animals will sacrifice themselves for the group. They will fight to the death to protect even one member of their pack. They do not calculate costs or benefits. They do not negotiate. They simply act. He began describing the rescue operation. It started with their machines. Small drones that looked like insects and birds began appearing around our base. We thought they were for surveillance, but they were actually mapping our defenses and placing explosives. How many drones? Hundreds, maybe thousands. They came in waves over several days. Each one was different, designed for a specific task. Some carried listening devices. Others planted bombs. A few released chemical agents that made our sensors malfunction. Zeftar's mandibles clicked nervously. But the drones were just the beginning. On the fourth night, the real assault began. Human special forces moved through our perimeter like ghosts. They did not try to fight our guards. They simply made them disappear. Killed them? Worse. They captured them and used them as sources of information. The humans had developed new interrogation techniques that broke down mental resistance in hours instead of days. Our soldiers told them everything they wanted to know. The old commander shuddered at the memory. By dawn, the humans knew the location of every guard, every weapon, every security system in our base. They had turned our own people into intelligence assets. How did they get into the prison? They did not break in. They walked in through the front door. Zeftar's voice became hollow. Major Collins and his team had captured enough of our soldiers to create perfect disguises. They dressed like coalition officers and used our own security codes to access the facility. He continued the story. When they reached the prison level, they did not just free Sergeant Carter's squad. They freed every prisoner in the facility. Human, coalition, and civilian. Everyone. Why would they do that? Chaos. With hundreds of confused prisoners running through the base, our security forces could not tell who was friend and who was enemy. The humans used the confusion to move freely through our facility. Zeftar took another drink before describing the most disturbing part. But freeing the prisoners was not enough for the humans. They wanted to send a message. Major Collins divided his forces into hunting teams and began systematically eliminating our command structure. They killed your officers? Not killed, hunted. Like animals hunt prey. The old commander's voice shook slightly. They used our own base against us. They knew where every officer would be at any time of day. They set traps in our command rooms. They poisoned our food supplies. They turned our automated defense systems against us. Crixilla felt sick. How long did this go on? 6 hours. In 6 hours, the humans had turned our most secure facility into a death trap. But the worst part was how they enjoyed it. Enjoyed it? They were laughing, playing games, making jokes while they hunted us down. Zeftar's 4 eyes stared into the distance. Sergeant Carter, who had been our prisoner just hours before, was leading one of the hunting teams. He was smiling while he killed my soldiers. The old commander described how the humans had used psychological warfare alongside physical violence. They played recordings of our captured officers begging for mercy. They displayed the bodies of our commanders in public areas as warnings. They made us afraid of our own shadows. What happened to the prisoners they rescued? That is the most chilling part. Sergeant Carter and his squad, who had been beaten and tortured during their captivity, immediately joined the assault. Even wounded, even exhausted, they fought with the same intensity as the fresh troops. Zeftar finished his drink and continued. Corporal Brooks had been shot in the leg during her capture. She could barely walk. But when Major Collins offered to evacuate her to safety, she refused. She wanted to help hunt down the soldiers who had captured her. Did they succeed? Completely. By the end of the operation, Crimson Valley Base was destroyed. Most of my officers were dead. The survivors needed months of psychological treatment before they could return to duty. The old commander stood up slowly. But the humans were not finished. As they prepared to leave, Major Collins found me hiding in the communication center. I expected him to kill me or take me prisoner. What did he do? He thanked me for taking good care of his people. Said Sergeant Carter had told him we followed the rules and treated prisoners fairly. Then he gave me a warning. Zeftar looked down at Crixilla. He said that humans remember kindness, but they never forget cruelty. He told me that as long as we treated their people with respect, they would do the same for us. But if we ever harmed one of their own again, they would show us what real cruelty looked like. The old commander walked away, leaving Crixilla alone with her thoughts. She realized that the humans had not just rescued their people, they had demonstrated their power and established rules for future conflicts. The message was clear. Humans would protect their own at any cost, and anyone who threatened them would face consequences beyond imagination. As she sat in the quiet cantina, Crixilla wondered if the Coalition had ever really been at war with humanity, or if they had simply been learning their place in a new order. 3 days passed before Crixilla found the courage to return to the cantina. The second story had given her nightmares. She kept dreaming about humans hunting through dark corridors, laughing while they killed. But she needed to know more. Her editor at the Galactic News Network wanted the complete story, and she had promised to deliver it. Commander Zeftar was not in his usual corner when she arrived. For a moment, she thought he might have left the station. Then she spotted him, near the observation windows, staring out at the stars. His 4 arms hung at his sides and his shoulders were slumped like someone carrying a heavy burden. "Commander?" she called softly. He turned slowly. His 4 eyes looked tired, older than before. "You are persistent, young one. Most people would have stopped asking questions by now." "I need to understand," Crixilla said. "The Coalition leaders say humans are our partners now. They say the war was a mistake that made us stronger together. But your stories..." "My stories tell the truth they do not want you to hear." Zeftar walked back to his usual table and sat down heavily. "Very well. One more story. But this one will show you something even worse than their violence or their pack loyalty." Crixilla sat across from him and activated her recording device. What could be worse? Their intelligence, their ability to learn and adapt. Zeftar ordered his usual drink from the serving robot. The third major battle I fought against humans took place at Fortress Kath Moran. I have heard of that place. It is famous throughout the galaxy. It was famous. The fortress had never fallen in 2,000 years of galactic warfare. Every species in the coalition had tried to take it at some point. All had failed. The fortress was built into a mountain of solid crystal, with defenses that had been improved over centuries. Zeftar received his glowing drink and took a small sip. We thought it was the perfect place to make our stand against the humans. The fortress could hold 50,000 soldiers and had enough supplies to last for years. The weapons systems could destroy entire fleets. It was supposed to be our greatest victory. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. The humans simply did something no one had ever tried before. The old commander's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Instead of attacking the fortress, they studied it. For 3 months, they sent teams of scientists and engineers to examine every stone, every circuit, every piece of ancient technology. Krixla frowned. That does not sound very dangerous. That is what we thought. The humans were led by Colonel Rick Hayes and Major Kate Phillips, both from their engineering corps. We assumed they were planning a traditional siege. We prepared for months of battle, stockpiling weapons and food. Zeftar paused to look out the cantina window at the passing ships. But the humans were not preparing for battle. They were preparing for something much more sophisticated. They called it aggressive archaeology. I do not understand. Neither did we at first. The human teams did not just study the fortress from outside. They sent small groups to explore the surrounding area, looking for old ruins and abandoned structures. They interviewed local civilians about legends and stories. They even dug up ancient burial sites. The old commander continued his explanation. What we did not realize was that they were learning the complete history of the fortress. Not just how it was built, but why it was built, who built it, and how it had changed over the centuries. How could that help them attack it? They discovered that the fortress had been built by the Kethmoran Empire, which had fallen 500 years ago. The current occupants, our own people, did not fully understand the ancient technology they were using. We knew how to operate the systems, but not how they actually worked. Zeftar took another drink and continued. Captain Ben Rodriguez led a team that spent weeks in the old Imperial archives, studying technical manuals that were older than most civilizations. They learned the original programming languages, the maintenance protocols, and the security systems. They were planning to hack into the fortress? Much more than that. They were planning to become the fortress. The old commander's voice became very quiet. While we were watching for their attack, small teams of humans had been infiltrating the mountain through ancient service tunnels that we did not even know existed. Krixla leaned forward. How is that possible? The original builders had created maintenance access points throughout the mountain. Over the centuries, these passages had been forgotten and sealed off. The humans found them, opened them, and used them to move freely inside our supposedly impregnable fortress. Zeftar described how the infiltration had proceeded. Lieutenant Ashley Turner led teams of specialists who disguised themselves as maintenance robots. The fortress had hundreds of automated systems for cleaning, repairs, and security. The humans studied these machines and built perfect copies. You mean they were inside the fortress while you were defending it? For weeks. They moved through our corridors during shift changes. They accessed restricted areas during maintenance periods. They even attended our briefings, standing in the corners like ordinary service robots while our commanders discussed battle plans. The old commander shuddered at the memory. But they were not just observing. They were making changes. Small modifications to the computer systems, tiny adjustments to the security protocols, minor alterations to the environmental controls. What kind of changes? The kind that would turn our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. Zeftar's voice became hollow. On the day of their attack, nothing worked the way it was supposed. Two of the blast doors that were meant to protect us trapped us in our own rooms. The communication systems that coordinated our defense began broadcasting human propaganda directly into our minds. He continued describing the nightmare. The automated defense systems that were supposed to destroy enemy ships began targeting our own reinforcements. The environmental controls that maintained our atmosphere started pumping in gases that made us drowsy and confused. How could they do all that without being detected? Because they had become part of the fortress. They understood it better than we did. They knew every circuit, every program, every mechanical system. They had turned themselves into the fortress's new brain, and we were just parasites they needed to remove. Zeftar finished his drink and signaled for another. But the most terrifying part was how they revealed themselves. When the fortress was completely under their control, the human robots removed their disguises. We realized that we had been sharing our most secure facility with our enemies for months. What did they do then? They gave us a choice: surrender immediately and be treated as prisoners of war, or continue fighting and be eliminated by our own defenses. The old commander's 4 eyes stared into the distance. Most of my soldiers chose to surrender. They had watched their own fortress hunt them like prey. They were too broken to keep fighting. Krixla was quiet for a moment. Did you surrender, too? I tried to keep fighting. I gathered a small group of loyal soldiers and attempted to retake the control center. Zeftar's mandibles clicked sadly. We made it 3 levels before the fortress itself stopped us. How? The walls began moving. The floors started tilting. The ceiling opened up and dropped automated defense drones on us. It was like the entire mountain had come alive and decided we were not welcome anymore. The old commander received his fresh drink and continued. When we were finally captured, Colonel Hayes and Major Phillips were waiting for us in the command center. They were sitting in our own chairs, using our own computers, completely comfortable in a place that had been our stronghold just hours before. What did they say to you? Colonel Hayes apologized for the deception. He said they had tried to find a way to take the fortress without damaging it, since it was such an important historical site. Major Phillips showed me the modifications they had made, explaining how they had improved the ancient systems while taking control of them. Zeftar took a long drink before continuing. But the worst part was when they offered me a tour of my own fortress. They showed me secret passages I had never known existed. They explained the true purpose of rooms I had used for years without understanding. They knew more about our base than we did. Did they destroy the fortress? No. They kept it. They turned it into a human research facility where they study ancient galactic civilizations. The same place where we made our greatest stand against them is now where they learn how to defeat other species more efficiently. The old commander stood up slowly. That is when I understood the truth about humans. They do not just conquer their enemies. They absorb them. They take everything we know, everything we have built, everything we are, and they make it part of themselves. He looked down at Krixla with all 4 eyes. The fortress still stands. It is stronger now than it ever was under coalition control, but it belongs to them, just like everything else they touch. As Zeftar walked away, Krixla stared at her recording device. She was beginning to understand that the human integration into the coalition was not the partnership her leaders claimed it was. It was something much more complex and frightening. The humans had not just joined the coalition. They were transforming it from within, one fortress, one world, one species, at a time. A week passed before Krixla returned to the cantina. She had tried to write her story, but every time she started, the words would not come. How could she explain to the galaxy that their new human allies were not what they seemed? Who would believe such tales? She found Commander Zeftar in the same corner, but something was different. His usual drink sat untouched on the table and his forearms shook slightly. When he saw her approaching, he looked away. "I do not think I can tell you this story," he said before she could even sit down. "Commander, please. I need to understand what happened." "No. You do not understand." His voice was barely a whisper. "This story will change how you see everything. Once you know what humans are truly capable of, you will never feel safe again." Krixla sat down anyway and placed her recording device on the table. "Tell me about Haven's Reach." Zeftar's entire body went rigid. His mandibles clicked rapidly, and his 4 eyes stared at her in shock. "How do you know that name?" I researched. The war after our last conversation. Haven's Reach appears in the records, but all the details are classified. What happened there? The old commander was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Hollow. Empty. Haven's Reach was a human colony on the edge of their territory. 20,000 civilians, families, children. They had no military value, no strategic importance. They were just people trying to build a new life on a distant world. Why did the coalition attack them? Because we were losing the war. Zeftar picked up his drink but did not sip it. After defeats at Kepler Colony, Crimson Valley, and Fortress Keth Moran, the coalition high command was desperate. They decided that the only way to stop the humans was to show them that we could be just as ruthless. Crixla felt a chill. What did they do? They used forbidden weapons, biological agents that had been banned by every civilized species in the galaxy, viruses designed to attack human genetic structures, toxins that dissolved their nervous systems, parasites that ate them from the inside. The old commander set down his drink without tasting it. The attack lasted 3 days. By the end, every human on Haven's Reach was dead. Men, women, children, elderly, all of them. The coalition wanted to send a message that humanity was not invincible. That is horrible. But what does this have to do with your story? Zeftar looked at her with all 4 eyes. It has everything to do with my story. Because what happened next showed us what humans really are when they stop pretending to be civilized. Istadam began describing the human response. Within hours of discovering the massacre, humanity declared what they called total war, not against our military forces, against our entire civilization. What do you mean? I mean they stopped following any rules. They stopped caring about civilian casualties. They stopped treating us as enemies to be defeated. They began treating us as diseases to be eliminated. Zeftar's voice became very quiet. The campaign was led by General Frank Stone and Admiral Helen Clark. I had fought against them before. They were tough but fair commanders who followed the traditional laws of war. After Haven's Reach, they became something else entirely. What changed? Everything. The humans divided their forces into what they called cleansing fleets. Each fleet was assigned to completely sterilize one star system. Not conquer, not occupy. Sterilize. The old commander described the horror that followed. They started with the Kethvar system, home to 12 billion coalition civilians. The humans did not send invasion forces, they sent machines. What kind of machines? Self-replicating nanobots that consumed metal. Within days, every ship, every station, every piece of technology in the system had been dissolved. The coalition fleet stationed there was left floating in space with no engines, no weapons, no life support. Zeftar continued the terrible story, but that was just the beginning. Captain Joe Murphy and Commander Grace Lee developed something they called the Pandora Protocol. They used genetic engineering to create Earth predators specifically designed to hunt coalition species. That is impossible. I wish it were. They made wolves that could track us by our pheromone signatures. Bears that could digest our armor, plating. Birds that laid eggs in our breathing apparatus. They turned millions of years of Earth evolution into weapons designed to kill us. The old commander's hands shook as he spoke. They released these creatures on our worlds and then sat back to watch. Entire planets became hunting grounds where coalition civilians were prey for monsters designed by human scientists. Crixla felt sick. How could they create such things so quickly? Because they had been preparing. While we thought they were just another species trying to join galactic civilization, they had been studying all of us, learning our biology, our weaknesses, our fears. Haven's Reach just gave them an excuse to use that knowledge. Zeftar described more horrors. In the Altair system, they released a modified virus that attacked our reproductive systems. Not to kill us, but to make sure we could never have children again. An entire species condemned to extinction through loneliness. What about military targets? There were no military targets anymore. The humans had decided that any species capable of what happened at Haven's Reach did not deserve to exist. They were not fighting a war. They were conducting an extermination. The old commander continued. Lieutenant Nancy Davis led a team that specialized in cultural warfare. They studied our art, our music, our religion, our history. Then they systematically destroyed everything that gave our lives meaning. How do you destroy culture? Very carefully. They did not just burn our libraries or demolish our monuments. They corrupted them. They changed our sacred texts, so they said the opposite of what they originally meant. They modified our historical records to make our heroes look like villains. They rewrote our songs to carry messages of despair and hopelessness. Zephytar's voice became even quieter. Within months, coalition worlds were populated by people who had lost all sense of who they were. Our children grew up not knowing their own heritage. Our elders forgot the stories that had sustained them for centuries. Did anyone try to stop them? How could we? Every time we tried to fight back, they escalated. When we attacked one of their research stations, they destroyed an entire civilian population center. When we tried to negotiate, they sent us recordings of our people being hunted by their created monsters. The old commander looked out the cantina window at the stars. The worst part was how efficient they were. They were not angry or emotional. They treated the extermination of entire civilizations like a scientific problem to be solved. What finally ended it? Surrender. Complete, unconditional surrender. The Coalition High Command realized that continuing the war meant the extinction of every non-human species in the galaxy. Zephytar picked up his drink and finally took a sip. But even then, the humans were not finished. General Stone and Admiral Clark presented us with terms that were worse than death. What kind of terms? Integration. They said they would stop the killing if we agreed to become part of human civilization, not as conquered subjects but as willing partners. They offered to undo the genetic damage they had caused, to restore our cultures, to give us back our worlds. That sounds generous. It was a trap. The most sophisticated trap ever devised. Zephytar's mandibles clicked sadly. They made us grateful for their mercy. They convinced us that joining them was our choice, not their victory. The old commander continued. Captain Lisa Morgan and Colonel David Foster were put in charge of the integration process. They were kind, helpful, understanding. They listened to our concerns and addressed our fears. They made us feel like equals in the new galactic order. But, slowly, carefully, they began changing us. Not through force or coercion, through kindness, through help, through making our lives better in small ways that we barely noticed. Zephytar finished his drink and stood up. Within a generation, our children thought like humans. They valued human ideals. They dreamed human dreams. We kept our biological forms, but our minds, our souls, had become human. He looked down at Crixilla. That is the true horror of what happened at Haven's Reach. The humans did not just show us their capacity for destruction. They showed us their capacity for creation. They can destroy entire civilizations and then rebuild them in their own image, making the survivors grateful for the privilege. As the old commander walked away, Crixilla realized that she was not just recording a story about the past. She was documenting the process by which humanity was quietly reshaping the entire galaxy, one species, one world, one mind at a time. The integration was not a peace treaty. It was the final phase of humanity's conquest, and it was already complete. Crixilla sat alone in her quarters for 3 days after hearing the fourth story. She had not eaten, had not slept properly, had not even looked at her recording device. The weight of what she had learned pressed down on her like a physical thing. She kept thinking about her own species, the Zentari, and how eagerly they had welcomed human friendship after the war. On the 4th day, she forced herself to return to the cantina one final time. She needed to hear the end of the story, even though she was terrified of what Zephytar might tell her. The old Altarian was not at his usual table. The cantina staff told her he had not been seen for days. Crixilla was about to leave when she spotted him on the observation deck, staring out at the vast emptiness of space through the transparent metal walls. "Commander?" she called softly. He turned slowly. His 4 eyes looked different now, sadder, more distant. "I wondered if you would come back." Most people would have stopped asking questions after the last story. I need to know how it ended, Krixla said. The real ending. Zeftar was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. The real ending is that it never ended. It is still happening. Every day, every moment, all around us. He gestured toward the window where human and coalition ships moved together through space. Do you see those vessels working side by side? Do you see how smoothly they cooperate? How perfectly they understand each other? Yes. It shows how well the integration has worked. No. Zeftar's mandibles clicked slowly. It shows how completely we have been absorbed. They moved to a quiet corner of the observation deck. Krixla activated her recording device for the final time. The peace negotiations began 6 months after the coalition's surrender, Zeftar said. We expected the humans to demand territory, resources, tribute payments, all the traditional spoils of war. Instead, they sent Ambassador Paul Carter and Chief Negotiator Mary Johnson. What did they want? Nothing we expected. They did not want to rule us or control us. They wanted something much more subtle and much more permanent. They wanted to help us. Krixla frowned. Help you? That is what they called it. Ambassador Carter explained that the war had been a terrible misunderstanding. He said humans had no desire to dominate other species. They only wanted to share the benefits of their civilization with their new galactic neighbors. Zeftar began describing the negotiations. Chief Negotiator Johnson presented what they called integration protocols, voluntary programs designed to help coalition species recover from the war and build better lives for their people. That sounds reasonable. It was designed to sound reasonable. Everything the humans offered was beneficial in the short term. Medical technology to extend our lifespans, educational programs to increase our intelligence, agricultural improvements, to end hunger on our worlds, the old commander continued. Captain Robert Hayes led the medical integration team. He offered treatments that could repair the genetic damage caused by their biological weapons. Our people were dying from the viruses they had released. Captain Hayes had the cure. Did it work? Perfectly. Too perfectly. The medical treatments did not just heal our people, they improved them, made them stronger, smarter, more resilient. Our scientists could not understand how such advanced medicine was possible. Zeftar's voice became quieter. What we did not realize was that the treatments included other modifications, subtle changes to our brain chemistry that made us more cooperative, more trusting, more willing to accept human guidance. Krixla felt a chill. They were changing your minds? Not changing. Enhancing. The humans were very careful to explain that all modifications were improvements. Better memory, clearer thinking, stronger emotional control. They made us smarter and more capable while quietly adjusting how we thought about certain topics. The old commander described the educational programs. Colonel Linda Foster established schools throughout coalition space. She said human educational methods could help our children reach their full potential. What was wrong with that? Nothing was wrong with it. That was the problem. The human teaching methods were superior to our own. Our children learned faster, retained more information, and developed better critical thinking skills. As parents, how could we object to our children becoming smarter? Zeftar continued. But the curriculum included human history, human philosophy, human values. Our children learned to think like humans, while still believing they were thinking for themselves. What about the adults? Major Karen Phillips directed the cultural exchange programs. She organized festivals where humans and coalition species could share their traditions, their art, their music. It seemed like a wonderful way to build understanding between our peoples. The old commander's mandibles clicked sadly. But human culture was so much richer, so much more varied, so much more appealing than our own. Our people began adopting human customs not because they were forced to, but because human ways seemed better. Krixla was beginning to understand. They were replacing your culture with theirs. Slowly, carefully, with our full cooperation and gratitude. Within 10 years, most coalition worlds celebrated human holidays instead of their own. Our musicians played human songs. Our writers told human stories. Our philosophers debated human ideas. Zeftar described the economic integration. General Susan Davis established trade agreements that brought incredible prosperity to coalition worlds. Human technology, human products, human services. Everything we needed to build modern, comfortable lives. But there was a cost. The cost was independence. As we became dependent on human technology, we lost the ability to maintain our own. Our engineers stopped learning traditional methods because human methods were more efficient. Our manufacturers stopped producing local goods because human products were superior. The old commander looked out at the stars. Lieutenant Commander James Wilson directed the governmental advisory programs. He said humans wanted to share their expertise in administration and law with coalition leaders. More helpful assistance? The most helpful of all. Human advisors were placed in every coalition government to provide guidance on policy decisions. They were not rulers or dictators. They were consultants who offered suggestions and recommendations. Zeftar's voice became hollow. But their suggestions were always better than our ideas. Their recommendations always led to better outcomes. Within a few years, no coalition leader made any important decision without consulting their human advisor first. What about you, Commander? Did you go through the integration process? I resisted at first. I remembered the war. I knew what humans were capable of. But resistance became impossible as everyone around me changed. The old commander continued. My own soldiers began questioning my orders when they conflicted with human suggestions. My superiors replaced me with officers who were more cooperative with integration protocols. I was given a choice: adapt or be left behind. So you chose integration? I chose survival. Captain Sandra Brooks was assigned as my personal integration specialist. She was kind, patient, understanding. She never forced me to do anything. She simply helped me see the benefits of thinking more like a human. Zeftar touched the side of his head with one of his forearms. The neural modifications were voluntary. Captain Brooks explained that they would help me overcome the trauma of the war, reduce my anxiety, improve my decision-making abilities. I agreed because I trusted her. Did they work? They worked perfectly. I stopped having nightmares about the war. I felt calmer, happier, more optimistic about the future. I began to see the integration not as conquest but as evolution. The old commander was quiet for a moment. But sometimes, like now, the original programming reasserts itself. I remember what we were before the humans came. I remember what we lost. Crixla looked at her recording device and realized something terrifying. Commander, why are you telling me these stories? If the integration was so complete, why do you still remember? Zeftar smiled, but it was not a happy expression, because I am not the only one with conflicted programming. The humans wanted some of us to remember. They wanted witnesses who could tell the story of their conquest to future generations. Why would they want that? As a warning, as an example, as proof of what they are capable of. He gestured toward her recording device. Do you think you found me by accident? Do you think this interview was your idea? Crixla stared at him in horror. You mean, I mean that everything you have experienced, every question you have asked, every story you have recorded, was planned by human psychological specialists. You are not documenting history. You are participating in it. The old commander stood up slowly. Your species, the Zentari, are scheduled for integration next year. The humans need a journalist to prepare your people for the process, to make them understand what cooperation means, to help them make the right choice. What choice? The same choice every species faces when they encounter humanity. Submit willingly and be absorbed with kindness, or resist and be destroyed with extreme prejudice. Zeftar walked toward the exit, then stopped and looked back. The recordings you have made will be broadcast throughout Zentari space. Your people will hear these stories and decide that integration is preferable to war. They will thank you for helping them make the wise decision.